Hey everyone, so welcome, I guess, to my second turn and tour of duty hosting the Crunch. These shows have been like super awesome. And so this spring has been like a super busy spring conference season, so I've been on the road quite a bit for both business and personal travel. My baby girl and firstborn just graduated high school, so that's been super exciting. And it's been sort of leading me to think through this whole digital workplace and its technologies more from a journey perspective, where the focus is on people and their experiences, and sort of reimagining it through the metaphor of a compass, right? A digital workplace compass, if you will. And how do we find our true north as individuals, enterprises, technology providers, and end users? And so key to that journey and our relationships with each other, and I guess building community, is effective communications and messaging and storytelling, whether it's from brands to consumers or consumers to brands, themselves, right? So I'm excited to bring on our guest today, the amazing Kylie Mojaddidi, Senior Vice President from Method Communications, podcast host, storyteller, and all-around great human being. So welcome, Kylie.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So what's been going on with you? What's up?
Oh gosh, what hasn't been going on? I feel like similar to you, you're going through a different milestone with your firstborn. Mine's starting kindergarten and
There
yours
you
is
go.
graduating. So obviously raising children is a lot. But also, yeah, you mentioned that I started podcast a little bit ago, and similar to kind of the mindset that you were thinking through, like where are we going with all of this digital technology and how does
Mm-hmm.
storytelling play into who we are, how we effectively communicate, how AI and all of these new tools are changing the way that we can show
Mm-hmm.
up in the world. And part of the goal of my podcast is to kind of look into who are we as people, and then how do we communicate with both ourselves, like what are the stories we tell ourselves, and then
Yeah.
how do those help shape how we show up in the world, and where does technology play into that, where does spirituality play into that. But I think it's a great tie-in to what's happening in the world today. I mean, WWDC is taking place right now, and there's some cool
Indeed.
conversations coming out of there. I really loved Steve Wozniak's quote yesterday. He said, I have AI, and that is actual intelligence. And I think that that's a nice thing. What does that actually mean? And where does AI and actual intelligence come into play in the communications world today?
Yeah. Waz always has those pithy statements, right?
Yes. I did like that one, though, because I thought that it made a nice point about the fact that today you can choose to show
Mhm.
up as anyone with the infiltration
Indeed.
of AI from the comms world. But the most important thing to keep in mind is that finding what is truly authentic to you, your story, and the stories that you tell about yourself and the world around you
Yeah.
are arguably the most important things that we can be teaching our clients, and also that we can be teaching our children. And what does it mean to be authentic to you? And how do you use these new tools to make sure that you're not losing
Yeah.
any of it?
It's funny. And so speaking about journey and being authentic yourself. So my daughter, since she was, so we call her the pet whisperer. So since she was around 4 or 5 years old, has known that she wants to be a vet. She's just known it. And everything she's done from that point till now, whether it's summer internships, what it is, she's been gearing towards being a vet, right? So I know her first choice school was like UC Davis. She actually going to be going probably I think to Michigan State, but for animal science. But everything she's done to this point has been towards being a vet. She did I think a couple summers ago the Thailand, where she went to the elephant sanctuary and volunteered there. So everything she's done, she's sort of been true to herself in that journey all throughout her 18 years now, I guess.
That's amazing. Good for her.
Yeah, absolutely. And so speaking of journey, then what's your journey been? From your start of your career to now at Method.
Yeah, so I want to say I accidentally fell into communications and public relations. I was always the child that would go up to strangers and say, "Hi, I'm Kylie. Look at my new shoes." I never had stranger danger. I always was drawn to connecting with people. So I felt like
I would have never guessed that, by the
it
way.
was a natural fit for me to fall into communications. But in school, I actually focused on psychology with
Hmm.
a specific focus on industry and organization. So more of the corporate psychology than the clinical. And I
Got it.
focus on corporate leadership because to me, I was always excited about what does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to get people to believe your story and want to
Hmm.
make an action based on the story that you tell them? How do you craft a narrative that then creates some sort of action? And
Yeah.
so jumped into PR shortly thereafter. And I've primarily grown my career at Method. I've been at Method for nearly a decade. I'm primarily focusing on our enterprise practice. So that's kind of where I'm at today, with a mix of clients on more of the generative AI side, where most clients now are having some
Yes.
infiltration of generative AI. And then the clients that are core to the technology stack, whether from the network storage infrastructure side of things, that are helping enterprises make that transition, because it's still happening from more of the on-premise area to the cloud journey. What does that actually look like? So I've kind of
Yeah.
grown up with data cloud computing as my career has grown. So it's been interesting to see that evolution from a client perspective, and how messaging has changed and shifted, and how we approach things like media training, corporate communications, executive communications, etc. But
Yeah.
that's how I ended up where I am today.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned the cloud computing. So you've gone through what was that cloud hype to now this AI hype, right? And similar strategies, right? How do you get people to sort of be true to their messaging and really tell a story, right? Beyond all the hype.
Mm-hmm. I think that's difficult to do, because if you take the brands away from the brand logos away from certain websites, and you look at just the descriptors, you might get confused at what company descriptor you're actually reading, because there are similarities across the board. And
Yeah.
that's purposeful, because there are similarities in what every company is doing now to maintain relevancy and to ensure that they're actually reaching an audience that will care about that message. But at the end of
Yeah.
the day, people want to read about people, and they want to read about how people are changing, growing, evolving, doing something new or interesting. And use
Yeah.
cases become really important in that piece of the puzzle. And that was one thing when we used to communicate a lot for Workplace from Facebook. We had that frontline worker story. There was the
Yeah.
people story that helped prove the technology's efficacy. And I think that's one thing that continues to stand out, is when companies have a proof point or a story focused on people and some solution that's helping
Yeah.
solve a problem they face in the workplace.
So I love what you just said. People want to read about people. And I find that so fascinating and true, because a part of my background is music. I love writing songs. My dad's a jazz musician, so I came up in that world. And one of the things I always loved about music was like the best songs are those songs that are true stories. From people's own experience, and because people really want to know and hear about what people are going through and their experiences.
Totally. I mean, you even look at someone like Taylor Swift, not to make this a Taylor Swift conversation, but I am a Swiftie. She's an expert at storytelling, and her
Yes.
songs take you on a journey from heartbreak to evolution to finding herself, etc. And people can relate to them. And I think, in a way, you have to think about your messaging from a corporate perspective in the same way. First, who is your audience? You need to know what
Yeah.
they want to hear. You need to know what the problem is that they're trying to solve. And then you need to find a way to tie your solution, your offerings, your product, or your vision, your corporate vision story, to that solution. And then
Yeah.
say, others may be doing it, but here's where we're providing a specific use case. And I think we've seen over the course of the last decade that there's been a
Yeah.
shift from companies wanting to be the one size fits all for everything, to we are
Yeah.
going to solve this one piece of the problem, and we're going to do it better than anyone else. And so those
Interesting.
solutions that are oriented towards one problem, I think, are becoming a lot more
Yeah.
well understood as a business model.
Yeah. So take us through that. You talked about doing that for clients. So take us through, I guess, the typical, maybe not typical, but maybe typical client journey, right? Where you have a brand come in, they need help. How do you take them from A to B to D to Z, I guess?
Yeah, that's actually the most fun part, because we've had clients come to us, let's say they're a year and a half out from a big exit or an IPO, and they want to shift their messaging because they have technical founders, which a number of these companies do in the enterprise
Yeah.
space. And so they need to shift not only their executive team from leaning towards this, how do I become a corporate vision narrative storyteller instead of in the weeds on the technology, but
Yeah.
then how do we also shift our company's perception from deeply technical in the weeds to a proper business model where the investor
Yeah.
audience and the VC audience is saying, this is something I want to contribute to because there's going to be a benefit for me in the long run. And ultimately, I think, dependent on the scenario, the strategy remains similar in who is your audience, How are you going to effectively reach them? What's the problem that you're solving? Again, but when it comes to that, I think the most fun is figuring out what's being said about you now that you want to shift. And then who's
Yeah.
saying that? Like who's owning those conversations? So doing some sort of an audit around this company is owning that message. We don't necessarily need to create a new category,
Yeah.
but we need to understand the importance of helping to define a category by being a bolstering point. And let's say you're the company that's raising that category up through proven
Yeah.
solutions. And how do we then tell that story? I think it comes back to proof, purpose, and then people at the end of the day.
That's so key, because as part of what I do, I do help my clients, with with sort of understanding their category. But I think to your point, it has to be organic. You can't just create a category just for creating category purposes, right? It has to be something organic. What's the problem that you're actually trying to solve, and then the category begins to sort of emerge out of that, right? But it's really what's the problem that we're actually trying to solve, right? And what's the use case that fits the technology. A lot of times, especially in this business, you deal with engineers, who have, they're engineers, right? And so they've created this thing that's like, yeah, this thing's gonna, solve world hunger, whatever it is. But how do you help them sort of define, okay, what's the story and what's the problem that you're trying to solve?
Yeah. And I think one thing that's important that from the agency and the client conversation, I will never be as ingrained in the product as the engineers who built the product. But that is not my role in the client agency relationship. My role is to understand how to tell a story, how to reach media, and what stories they have not yet told that have an opportunity to really make an impact, either to their
Yeah.
bottom line, for recruiting, for morale, etc. And then also have an understanding to be, we always say, like, know enough to be dangerous, where I can get on the phone with one of those technical leads and
Yeah.
understand the product and the vision from that product enough to say, the product isn't the story. The story is
Yes.
what the product is enabling. And that's a shift that
Yes.
I think we're seeing when it comes to working with more product led technical leaders who think
Hmm.
the product is the end story. And as communicators, we have to say, well, it's part of the story, but the story
Yeah.
is what your product is enabling someone to do or solve or identify. And when it comes to AI, that's how am I getting new insight? How am I creating new solutions? How am I finding value from something I previously found no value in because it was scattered, unstructured, etc. So that's
Yeah.
like a shift I'm seeing when it comes to how we communicate, how we tell those stories to clients that are in those deeply technical spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things, and this is how you and I have become friends, I guess, and work together. As an analyst, I sort of ride that fence between, the tech provider community, the engineers, right, all the geeks, and then also the enterprise, the end users, right, the consumers. And so I help brands. Okay, how do you begin to message to the end users, right? And then I help end users. How do you understand what brands are saying? So I don't know if I'm like the Tower of Babel, translating, everyone's, messaging, to each other. But I sort of ride that fence, and I always tell, providers, and again, to your point, you have to make it clear. You have to understand the roles and personas in the enterprise that you're talking to, whether it's the HR professional, the sales professional. Don't just look at the technology as, okay, this is, IT, this is, CRM. No. What is it actually doing for this enterprise, and that the person, that persona within that particular enterprise? Is that some of
And
the practice, or yeah, is that what you guys go through as well too, as you sort of work with brands?
yes, I would say that the link is quite intrinsic across how we're communicating with our clients and the people who are buying them. You need to know who's buying it, but also you need to know, is the person who's selling it changing based on the role
Mm.
that the product is playing at an organization. For instance, we have a client named Cresta, and they are doing contact center AI. So they're helping
Mm.
sales leaders utilize artificial intelligence and real-time conversations to help callers have a more seamless experience. And it's really cool because they're using behavioral science to say, like, this person is frustrated. Here's a
Ooh.
way to manage this conversation. So I
Yeah.
love, from my psychology background, that now AI is starting to bring in some of this behavioral science to help us
Yeah.
make decisions based on the emotion of the caller, or based on the language of the caller, or of the messaging that's going on the chat. And I think that's a really cool way to shift. But one thing is that they talk about, do we need a chief AI officer?
Hmm.
And arguably we might at some point in time, but right
Hmm.
now all of us, for the most part, are on the same playing field. So
Yeah.
as AI evolves, we probably are going to need someone who has more of an understanding of all of the nuances, the regulations, the policies. It's a similar
Yes.
conversation to cybersecurity companies saying that on your board, you should have someone who's ingrained in the cybersecurity industry. So that
Yes.
as new policies come up, as new regulations are happening across the board, like as AI becomes more regulated, you need someone to help you frame what that means for your customers and your clients. And I think that that's an important nuance that we'll start to see shape up over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, I think you're so true because one of the things with AI, and we can get into, so things around bias and all that, but I think the transparency, to your point again, is going to be key, right? And the explainability of it, right? Why does the AI make certain decisions that it makes? How do you begin to explain that? And so it's a way of building trust with the AI, and I'm sure from your brands, that's one thing that they're concerned about. How do we, make sure that we're building trust with end users and building trust within the community with what we're developing?
And I think Method actually was one of the first agencies that I am familiar with that had an AI policy put in place that we shared with all of our clients. And the
Hmm.
purpose wasn't that we don't believe in the power of generative AI. It was that we know that it's powerful. But at the end of the day, what
Yeah,
we offer to our clients is the ability to help them storytell from the
yeah,
perspective of experts. So our policy right now at Method is that we can use it for brainstorming and ideation, but there is no situation where a client should ever be developing something written by AI and then providing it to a
yeah,
publication or an outlet as original curated content by that
yeah,
individual. And I think that that's something that comes true when we're creating pitches, strategy briefs. Of course, we can use it for ideation and brainstorming, but at the end of the day,
exactly.
our clients aren't paying for AI to do something for them. They're paying for us with the expertise to know their product, to know their audience, to be able to tell them a strategy that makes place and the people like
Hmm.
yourself on the analyst or the media side that can help us tell those stories to their buyers or their core audience or just the industry as a whole who's intrigued about who's creating something new, unique, and interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and folks, please, even amongst my peers and amongst the analyst world and content creators, we know when something's written by AI. We know it's quite clear when the marketing piece. Yeah, that's AI.
Mhm. Yeah, and there's a ton of benefits. I mean, Jasper is one of our clients, and they recently acquired ClipDrop, an image generation platform from Stability AI. And it's
Mm,
amazing all of the capabilities that you can use there. Imagine if let's say you're running all of the online product for, let's say, Home Depot, and you're
mm,
curating a campaign around summer. You can literally take a number of different products, remove the
yeah,
backgrounds, and do a summer campaign around certain products that you want to categorize as part of this summer campaign. And it
yeah,
seamlessly does that for you and creates this synchronicity across all of those products in a way that's so easy and takes out some of that guesswork.
absolutely.
It becomes a
Yeah,
benefit there, but when you're actually using it from a content perspective to recreate something that you could be saying, I think we have to toy
yeah.
that line. There are so many benefits from the workplace perspective that I think we're starting to see. And we're working with a number of those companies because we're seeing a huge benefit and we're adopting them internally in a way that
Mhm.
is within our AI guidelines.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and to your point, I use it as well too for especially when I'm writing, reports, for again that ideation, that brainstorm. Because there's
Mhm.
sometimes and mind mapping, right? That ideation because sometimes there's certain connections that it's not fresh or top of mind. But then when I'll write a prompt about something to give me some ideas. I'm like, oh my god, yes, and I'll make certain connections because it's right there. I'm like, yes, that makes sense now. So the AI is useful, and I guess my point before is that, but I've noticed that some are using it, to become more productive in the sense of letting it write for them, and that's not cool.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So, in terms of method, you mentioned some of your customers already. What are some other interesting client stories that you sort of help brands sort of with their messaging and storytelling?
Oh gosh, well we have an awesome group of clients. One thing that's so amazing about Method is that we have a lot of employees that have a long tenure, like myself, that have been here for 9, 10, 11, 12 years, and some of our clients as
Mm,
well. Domo is one of our clients that's been with us for a long, long time. We helped take Qualtrics through the SAP acquisition. Confluent, we helped take through their IPO. Nutanix,
yeah.
we helped take through their IPO. And currently today, some of my clients are Bloomberg's Office of the CTO. We work with Commvault, who's a cyber resilience player. We work with Cresta, whom I mentioned does AI for contact centers, Jasper. We also work with Genesis that does similar contact center AI technologies. So we have a number of clients that are kind of Informatica is one of our clients that obviously is doing a ton from the generative AI perspective and helping enterprises on their generative AI journey. They are the leader, arguably, when it comes to data management and data quality. And it's clear that that's one of the most important things to have on your AI journey. Amit Walia, the CEO at Informatica, says everyone is ready for AI except for your data. And I think that that is quite true. And we're seeing that in figuring out how do I get the most insight and value out of my data. So those are a few that I personally work on at Method.
Yeah, and one thing from the analyst perspective, I found companies, firms like Method so invaluable, not just because of the firm itself, but people like you, because what's happening with me, we've developed a relationship, where you help me and firms like yourself help me to discover new companies, right? To discover new things that are happening in tech and new opportunities as well. So there's this interesting relationship where we've built community and relationship where you're sort of feeding me things I would have never seen for the most part.
Mm-hmm. That's the best part about our job, I think, is building those relationships and staying curious and interested. I think after having children, I became better at my job truly because I became more curious about the world, about the companies that are out there, about the reporters, because that world has gotten so much smaller since I first started in PR. But it's amazing to be able to see and work with all of these companies across the globe on a global scale, and especially just nationally, that are making such a big impact and really setting the stage for what this next evolution of technology is going to look like. And so having a role in being able to help frame those communication strategies is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, and I've watched your career. You've been really effective at sort of bridging, not so much the gap, but bridging that PR world with the analyst relationship world. How much of that is just your natural, flow of who you are?
Oh, well, I'm going to give some kudos here to our VP of AR, Melissa Bleasdale. I had the pleasure of coaching her for a bit, and she actually curated our entire practice here at Method. So she recently launched our AR practice at Method. So she helps our clients work with folks like you more directly. And before we had that, it was something that we had to toe the line of making sure that we were providing value to folks that kind of straddled the media and analyst perspective. And how do we then give them tools where they understand the value? They're then being able to talk with customers and then also being able to chat with our clients about who are they serving? Like, why are they important? What's the model look like? And what are the solutions? How do they compete in the market? Because at the end of the day, we want to be able to make sure that folks like you have an understanding as you're talking with other companies and you're also talking with the end user. You can then say, well, I have a frame of understanding about what this company does and why they actually might be a great option for a customer who's looking for XYZ solution.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think, and now we get back to the AI discussion, what do you think is next, for generative AI and some of the clients that you've been working with?
Oh gosh, we kind of were joking that internally that what we'll see with AI is that instead of this fear over AI taking certain jobs, we'll see AI become kind of your work bestie, where you're looking forward to being able to bounce ideas off of each other. You're looking forward to have a brainstorm, and you're using it as a tool for ongoing collaboration, but also it's able to help you if you're like, I need a tag team on this. I have too many calls today. Can you just help me summarize the most important things for me so that I don't have to worry about it? We're seeing it already happen in Slack, where there's tools to summarize the messages, especially those that you're tagged in, so that you can more quickly distill where am I needed on all of these different teams. And I think we'll start to see a lot more of that, but it'll go to our mobile devices. It'll go to our desktop devices. It'll be baked into our OS. So I think we'll start to see some of that where at every layer where we are touching technology, we will also be touching AI. And those of us that were here before it was created will understand where it's being used. And those of us like my daughter who will grow up with it won't know the difference. So I think there'll be this, I think the word co-pilot, I don't really like to use, but to a degree, will be that like Iron Man Jarvis situation where we can ask questions, get responses, and engage. But the human piece of it will still be required. At the end of the day, I think the emotion and the connection will be critical, but there will need to be some sort of a bridge. And I think there will end up being regulation to help make that distinction.
Yeah, and so I agree with you because I think the thing with AI is that, and I love the work bestie metaphor. That's my work bestie. Help me out, AI. But to
Yeah.
your point, but to your point, I think it's baked into the technologies that we are using, right? So to the point where I think where AI, it's not even a separate thing. It's just woven into what you do. So whether what you're doing is sales related, marketing related, if the AI can almost be like the engine under the hood where you don't see it, but it's making the car move, it's making things work, right? And I think that's where we're moving towards. You don't want to actually notice the AI. You just want to sort of, flow within your day of work and then just have the AI results and the outcomes just be there. Just again, your work bestie, where you're not even sort of thinking about breathing, right? You're just kind of flowing and you're getting help. Productivity is increasing
Exactly.
and so forth, yeah.
And I think that that's what we've seen with a lot of our software as a service clients is when you don't have that tangible product because it's software based or it's cloud based, then
Yeah.
you just need it to work. And clients will only, or their customers will understand if something's not working, if it's not working. But otherwise, it should
Exactly.
just be going seamlessly and should be enabling you to do work better, either faster or help you solve problems more easily. But again, it's under the hood, so it's not something that you can visibly see, but you know when it's working and you know when it isn't.
Yeah. So, so we're on the other side of the pandemic, right? Any interesting learnings that you've had sort of, from 2020 through now through the pandemic?
I think one thing that became more clear to me is that some of the formalities of these sorts of conversations have become a little bit less nuanced. And I think that that's an exciting piece of the puzzle because we kind of dropped some of those formalities of, oh, hey, everyone make sure we're 100% buttoned up, which of course we still need to be. But at the same time, we're able to have a little bit more fun when we're engaging with clients or when we're just engaging in some of these back and forth. Let's be human beings. We are all human beings at the end of the day. And I love that we've kind of had a little bit more of that personal touch that I think was maybe a little bit lost when everyone was kind of in the grind in the day to day, traveling into the office so much.
Yeah, I thought I was going to have to step in for a second, but he's back.
No.
I don't know what happened, but he's back. So I'm stepping back out.
Oh man, my mouse fingers went too quick there.
I just kept going because I figured you would be back.
Kylie, just keep on going. Yeah.
So ultimately, I don't know if I lost you for some of that, but my end point was that I feel like we've moved away from some of the very formal back and forth with clients and with each other. And we've
Yeah.
kind of dropped the fourth wall a bit, and that we are all people. We have kids, we have lives outside of work. And
Yeah.
I think that COVID helped us realize that there is a work-life balance we have to strike. And of course, it was, instrumental in many ways, many of them negative. But I think that the positive out of
Yeah.
that situation was the way that we communicate with each other has to be more human.
And for me, COVID, I think it was one of the first times we began to work together more so back with Facebook and
Uh-huh.
Meta, was that I began to, like, you helped me actually during those years sort of launch this whole podcast thing and live streaming, because I began to see, okay, we can't meet in person anymore. How do I still build community, still connect with people? And we found that, wow, through live streaming, through video, we can still connect, we can still tell our stories and still hear each other's stories. And so that's, for me, it was like finding myself, my authentic self, through sort of live streaming, through multimedia, creating content, and then connecting with people that way, right? And it was great. And then post COVID, wow, we could still keep doing that, right? And still connect with people using those same mediums. But it was learning for me to sort of find my voice, virtually, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, and totally. And I think people say it's hard to read the room when you're virtual. I would almost argue the
Yeah.
opposite because I can see you so much more clearly than I could in a room with 15 or so people. I can
Yeah.
see
Absolutely.
you directly. You can look at the screen. I can look in your eyes still. So I always tell my team, if you know the cues to look for, it's quite easy to read a virtual room. And
Indeed.
I think that that's also a benefit that we have, is I can still engage with you without having scheduling conflicts and all of those things. And we can still build community and relationship over a screen, which I think has been a huge benefit.
Yeah, if you know the cues, you can read the room virtually. I love that. I love that. Kylie with the one-liners here. Yeah. So now, I mentioned before, you're a storyteller, podcast host. How's that journey been? Sort of, I guess finding your own voice as well too. Not so much outside of work, but just being authentic to yourself, whether no matter where you are.
It's been amazing. I would say that that's probably my favorite platform is my podcast right now, and I think because I feel that it's a way to be vulnerable, and I love the opportunity to connect with other people in that way. And I love to talk, but I also love to ask questions. I love to hear about what someone else's journey has been. How did they become successful? How did they take the leap from leaving a corporate job to start a business focused on spiritually minded self-awareness? Like, that's incredible. How do you build a business from that? How do you make money? How do you become marketable? What are the tools you use? And I think that no matter where you go in your role, it's always interesting to hear from people who have followed a passion and a project has turned into a business for them. And I think that those are the stories that help me better understand how I can bring value to my own clients, where this multi-billion-dollar TAM that they're operating within, how do we then pull out certain insights from the unique individual to help tell the larger business story? And so it's been a benefit. And I think it's kind of been my secret weapon, I think, when it comes to being comfortable talking to people that are much more influential and well-versed in certain topics than me, and being able to kind of know enough to be dangerous again in a number of different topics.
Yeah, and I agree with you. To your point, doing this with you is, again, it's me finding my voice. I remember I was, coming from where I come from. I'm a hip hop baby, right? So I grew up, the 80s, 90s, I was, hip hop and so forth. And I remember I never brought that part of me to work. I always kind of kept it, especially in the analyst field. Like, I'm supposed to be geeky and and so forth. And I never brought it. I remember I was at a conference some years ago, and there was a gentleman on stage, some tech conference, and he had on a Wu-Tang shirt, and he was just comfortable on stage. I'm just like, I love Wu-Tang. I'm into hip hop. And I'm looking at myself, I'm all dressed up, I'm in the sports coat and I'm all tight pants, and I'm like, what am I doing here? But I loved his freedom, right, of being on stage and be like, wow, he's free. And I wanted that. And so it taught me that down. Like, you know what, I'm going to show up as myself, who I am, music lover, whatever I am me, right? And don't be afraid to show up as me, no matter where I am.
100%. You can always find me rapping to a Mac Dre song, a Tupac song. Those were played frequently at my wedding, so I hear you there.
Mac Dre, I'm gonna do it for the Bay. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love it. Oh my God. R.I.P. Mac Dre. And so for now that I'm on the West Coast, I'm now getting into all the slang now. I'm saying hella right now, right? I'm also saying South San Francisco, South City, so I'm getting it. I'm getting used to the lingo a little bit.
Yeah, I'm Bay Area born and raised, so for me, that has been an influence in my life forever. And when my kids were born, we were still playing hip hop every day in the car. My friends, don't you want to turn this down? I'm like, no, this is what I like to listen to. They're 4 months old. They don't know the difference. But I love that. You got to find, what does it mean to be authentic? So figure it out and then stay true to it. There can be boundaries, of course, but
yeah. Remember, one of the big things in hip hop, especially coming up, was keep it real, right? Keep it real. Always be real. Kylie, thank you so much for joining me. This has been so much fun. I love your headshot, by the way, that we used for the promo for this event. It's such a Kylie headshot. Now that I've known you, I'm like, that's such a Kylie headshot.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, my friend, and thanks everyone for joining us. Bye bye.